all of his demonic hosts will be cast into the lake of fire, the bottomless pit, for all eternity. So as we come to the gospel records, the conquest is just beginning. The gauntlet is being thrown down, as it were. But what about demon possession? How can people still be possessed with demons? Well, yes, brothers and sisters, it still happens, though it's not common. In fact, it's never been common. In fact, there are only 4 references to demon possession in the Bible other than those that we have in the 4 gospel records. But when we get to the 4 gospel records, there's many references to demon possession, though very few in the rest of the Bible. It seems that when Jesus came and walked as a man in Galilee and Judea and in the nearby areas, that Satan threw out all stops. And there was this tremendous increase in overt demonic activity, or at least more of it was exposed, and it was more seen and more aggressive. But now, with all of that being said, when it comes to demons, there is an element of mystery here. There are some things God in His infinite wisdom has deemed it best for us not to know, so we need to be careful here. To engage in speculations about things that God has chosen not to tell us can be dangerous. We can adopt very unbalanced and even fanciful notions about this subject that can actually bring discredit to the Christian faith and even trivialize the Bible's teaching about Satan, and I'm afraid that this has happened sometimes. So we must be content with what God has revealed to us. Someone has said, and I think correctly, I believe it was C.S. Lewis, there are 2 opposite errors that we can fall into when it comes to Satan and his demons. One is to have an excessive and unhealthy fascination and interest in them, and the other is to deny that they even exist. Well, we don't want to fall into either of those extremes. We must avoid them both. Well, that's just introduction. Kind of the elephant in the room here, this whole question about demon possession before we begin to look at the text. And with that introduction, let's begin now to look at our passage. And you'll notice that first of all, we have our Lord's encounter with a madman. When we left off last time, Jesus had just calmed the storm on the Sea of Galilee. And now we read in verse 26 of chapter 8, "Then they sailed to the country of the Gadarenes, which is opposite Galilee." So Gadara, which is also sometimes called Gergasa or Gerasa, was on the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee, and this was primarily Gentile territory. It was our Lord's first foray, so to speak, into Gentile land. And this explains in part why there were pig herders in this region. As you may know, to Jews, pigs were unclean, though it is possible there may have also been non-practicing Jews in the Gadara pig business as well. So they arrive to the shore of Gadara, and as soon as Jesus steps onto the land, he is met by this pathetic, pitiful-looking man, this wretched man, who, verse 28, cries out and falls down before him. Now imagine how startled and frightened by this Jesus' disciples must have been. What are we told about this man disappears and he cries out and falls down before Jesus? Now what are we told about this man's miserable condition? Well, first, he wore no clothes. He was naked. He was lacking in even common decency, roaming about in public nakedness. Secondly, he didn't live in a house, but was living in the tombs, isolated, morbid, antisocial. These tombs were probably rock-hewn caverns full of dead men's bones and probably vermin as well. Most of us here today, we are listening to me, we live in a home, we live with a family, or you may have friends that you hang out with, but not this man. No one wanted to be near this man, or he to them. Thirdly, he was dangerous. Matthew, in his account, tells us that he was exceedingly fierce, so that no one could pass that way. He was more like